President Trump positions U.S. military assets to dismantle drug cartels.
We're not talking about fentanyl here. Watch News' Justin Shecker reveals the dangerous drug.
Seizing hundreds of kilos of fentanyl.
4:47 a.m. at the High Lake Truck Yard in South Minneapolis. Rows of containers packed tightly stretched all the way to Hiawatha Ave. The yard had more than 86 refrigerated trailers parked overnight, many of which had previously appeared in unusual DOT reports. Abnormal weight loads, last-minute route changes, and erased GPS data. The drivers sleeping in their cabs had no idea that within minutes, this area would become the focal point of the largest DEA operation in Minnesota in nearly a decade. 1 block north, bordering Lake St., a convoy of black FBI and DEA SUVs turned off all lights and quietly split into formations. More than 300 heavily armed agents, equipped with infrared cameras, ballistic shields, moved in clusters through the narrow gaps between containers. This was not a raid on a local gang. This was a strike against the Cartel Trucking Empire, a disguised logistics network that had moved more than 52 tons of meth across 3 states in just 2 years. The target, North Star Freight and Repair, which from a distance looked like nothing more than an old truck repair garage right next to the Metro Blue Line tracks. But in federal records, it was a secret transshipment hub, where trailers were modified into refrigerated meth storage compartments, with cargo labeled perishable goods to breeze through checkpoints in minutes. Many drivers reported losing contact before vanishing from the GPS system. Some were later found exhausted, saying they had been forced to drive 30-hour straight routes. 4:52 a.m. The assault order was given. Flashbangs detonated in succession, white light exploding across the snow. Federal agents, search warrant, return fire erupted immediately. 18 guards in reflective vests rushed out from behind the trailers, using the narrow steel corridors to create suppressed firing positions. DEA agents deployed ballistic shields, blocking each position and tossing flashbangs into the maintenance area to break the defensive line. As the gunfire subsided, one team advanced straight into the repair area and opened the lift pit cover. The steel floor vibrated slightly, then lowered, revealing a dark void below. Pale blue light from the underground level reflected upward, clearly illuminating conveyor belts, rows of cold rooms, and chemical drums lined up like an industrial production line. The origin of the entire case began 24 hours before the raid. 5:18 a.m. on I-94 through Maple Grove, a semi-truck burst into intense flames right on the emergency lane. When firefighters approached, they found the cab locked from the outside. The driver could not escape. The fire was extinguished, but what stunned them was not the body. As the trailer floor warped from the heat, a second layer of steel was exposed. Beneath it was a hidden compartment, with sealed drums containing 5 tons of insulated refined meth. The information was sent to the DEA. Within hours, data from the vehicle was scrutinized, and one detail immediately stood out. This truck had previously been evidence in a drug trafficking bust last year, a case where Judge Duyle had thrown out the evidence due to procedural errors in seizure, forcing prosecutors to return the vehicle to the business owner. For many years, Judge Hassan Duyle had been seen as a model of Minnesota's judiciary, a lawyer from humble beginnings who rose through fair rulings, praised by the press as a voice for reform in Minneapolis. He appeared in community programs, lecturing on justice, always maintaining the image of an uncompromising guardian of the law. But in newly unsealed classified files, that name stood at the very center of an unsuspected network. Documents marked restricted showed he had intervened in dozens of trucking cases, erasing citations related to weight violations, suspending DOT inspections just as they were about to produce adverse evidence against certain logistics companies. The fire was not just an accident. It was the first piece of a much larger structure. When the data analysis team began examining telematics, they found journey logs had been edited. Stops, rest times, routes, all falsified. However, the underlying system data was not completely erased, and from it, a terrifying picture emerged. The truck's travel schedule, over the past 3 months, matched almost perfectly with Judge Duyle's court hearing calendar. Every time he presided over a drug trucking case, a shipment from North Star Freight would reroute or disappear from the GPS map. Payments between the company and various offshore accounts followed cycles identical to the activity rhythm of the Mexican cartel that the DEA had tracked for years. When cross-checking data from 13 trucks reported missing over 2 years, all had final coordinates around one single address, the yard that FBI and DEA raided at dawn, North Star Freight and Repair. There was no doubt left. A judge was not merely lenient, he was operating the legal protection mechanism for an entire pipeline. After an interagency meeting that very morning, the DEA officially launched Operation Snowbreaker, aimed not only at dismantling the underground facility, but at exposing the entire legal, financial, and transportation structure in which Judge Duyle played a pivotal role. One FBI analyst, after piecing together all the data, said just one sentence that silenced the entire briefing room. "We are not investigating a trucking company. We are investigating a shadow state operating on highways and shielded by the law." Forensic financial investigation began immediately after the server data from the North Star freight basement was decrypted. The initial numbers left the entire analysis room speechless. 407 million USD had circulated through 23 shell accounts, passing through 5 continents over 6 years, following financial paths calculated as meticulously as a military map. Money from Malta, Cyprus, Panama, Singapore, Johannesburg, all converged in Minneapolis through a non-profit fund that existed only on paper. From there, the funds trickled steadily into legal research funds in the name of Judge Hassan Duyle. No one could fathom how a judge earning $158,000 USD a year continuously received millions in international contributions to support local judicial reform. But when the analyst overlaid the data, money flows, hearing schedules, container movements, GPS and telematics, a clear shape of a criminal machine emerged. And Duyle was not merely beside it, he was at the controls. Every time an offshore account received a large deposit, a frozen food container left Minneapolis. Every time Duyle delayed a hearing, a meth shipment slipped through checkpoints in 7-12 minutes, too short for DOT personnel to unlock the cargo. Over 4 years, he had directly intervened in 27 drug trucking cases, and investigative records showed most ended the same way. Evidence excluded due to improper collection procedures. If each such case corresponded to a shipment, those seemingly administrative decisions had protected dozens of tons of meth moving on federal highways. One DEA investigator said, "He didn't just take money, he decided how many people out there would die this week." CDC data was cross-analyzed. During every period when trucking routes were legally greased, overdose cases in Minneapolis and Hennepin County rose 30 to 40%. The 93 to 96% pure meth produced by the cartel was enough to create millions of lethal doses from just a few tons. Yet the network protected by Duyle had moved 52 tons in 2 years. Tens of thousands of addicts, hundreds of devastated communities, sustained by one judge's signature. But his crimes went beyond protection. In decoded documents from North Star Freight, investigators found the cartel's standard operating procedures to ensure meth was never stopped. Instructions for drivers to disable GPS at dead zones, routes through residential areas to avoid way stations, protocols for locking cabs from the outside to prevent drivers from fleeing, even signal codes to alert transfer hubs of inspection risk. Some drivers found after days missing recounted being locked inside refrigerated trailers with the cargo to prevent betrayal. Forensics showed Duyle had known about this for 5 years. Not only did he ignore it, he signed decisions weakening refrigerated truck inspection procedures, citing reducing burden on local businesses. The FBI analysis team took 72 hours to reconstruct the network diagram. Money, rulings, transport routes, transfer hubs, were containers leaving Minneapolis, thank you payments. When the final board appeared, Duyle's name sat at the center, connected to every arrow. The forensic team lead pointed at it and said, "This cartel has producers, transporters, overseers, but the one who made it a complete machine is him." And right then the whole team understood they were not facing a corrupt official. They were facing the legal architect of an entire 52-ton meth empire, a system built so carefully it could operate right beside the government without suspicion. As the steel floor of the lift pit reached the bottom, a cold chemical smell surged up, mixing with the familiar garage oil scent, but sharper, more intense, like stepping into an industrial plant buried deep underground. Agents switched on tactical lights, beams sweeping across an unimaginably vast space, an underground level completely absent from the building's original blueprints. No one could believe an ordinary trucking facility could hide something this large. Before them stretched conveyor belts, dozens of meters long, plastic drums of refined meth passing through infrared sensors, checking purity. To the right was the fabrication room, a space filled with reaction vessels, stainless pipes, temperature control panels. The air was thick with solvent vapors, and the distinctive chemical smell of synthesis, proving this place was not just packaging, but actively refining meth on an industrial scale. Adjacent were 3 thick steel-doored cold rooms, still labeled frozen produce, refrigerated goods. A perfect disguise. Inside, cargo was stacked like walls, with real food boxes interspersed among identical-looking meth packages, distinguishable only by tiny laser markings invisible to the naked eye. DEA investigators recognized this cold seal technique the cartel had used in Mexico, but never before seen in Minneapolis. A few steps away was the most special room, the server room. 4 high-capacity server racks, lights blinking constantly, running a monitoring system for 12 logistics hubs across the Midwest. Screens showed traffic routes, temperature data, transport speeds, and container IDs. Each hub was marked with a different icon, all linked in a hierarchical model like an industrial neural network. At the center of the main screen was Minneapolis, labeled Node 0. An FBI technician looked and said, "This isn't a transfer point, this is the brain of the entire network." As they began cataloging evidence, gunfire suddenly erupted again from deep in the corridor. The cartel wasn't fleeing, they were holding to protect this facility's final secret. 6 gunmen appeared from the packing area, laying suppressive fire to keep distance. Agents reacted instantly. 2 teams split, one advancing with ballistic shields straight down the narrow corridor, the other flanking toward the fabrication room to cut off escape. Bullets echoed in the metal space, sparks flying as rounds hit steel beams. One agent took a minor shoulder wound, but no one stopped. In exactly 90 seconds, the entire armed group was subdued and disarmed. Once the final area was secured, agents returned to inventory. The numbers that emerged made everyone freeze for a moment. 52 tons of meth across the containers, nearly matching the DEA's long-tracked estimate. Behind a hidden steel partition was $74 million in cash, divided into 14 separate safes, wrapped in moisture-proof plastic, stacked by denomination like bank standards. Next to the cash were stacks of paper files casually stored in recycled boxes. When agents opened them, the air in the cold room chilled. Lists of missing drivers, shift schedules, routes, internal notes describing each as non-cooperative. Some marked under surveillance, some handed over, and some processed. These files confirmed what the DEA had only suspected. The cartel not only coerced drivers but eliminated those who risked breaking the route. A small monitoring room still held internal camera footage. Trailers locked from outside, drivers trapped with cargo to ensure silence, and midnight handoffs indistinguishable from legitimate warehouse procedures. In the center of the server room, an FBI analyst found the final encrypted file, a real-time transport map. Once decrypted, the group froze. The map showed meth containers moving interstate, passing checkpoints in an average of 9 minutes, with auto-generated check-in codes from a legitimate ID system accessible only to authorized personnel. These routes were internally called ghost corridors, invisible paths allowing illegal cargo to move faster than legal goods. And right at the map's center, one container was preparing to leave Minneapolis in under 2 hours. Investigators looked around the room, holding the entire empire's evidence. Industrial conveyors, disguised cold rooms, servers like a multinational logistics command center, 52 tons of meth, $74 million, and a list of drivers treated as expendables. He said simply, "This isn't a production site, this is the heart of the whole system," and they understood the dawn raid was only the beginning. The rest of the monster was still running on the highways, and if not stopped now, it would vanish into thin air, as if it never existed. Under the pale early morning light, as the North Star freight basement was fully secured, the signal from the transport map in the server room forced the entire DEA FBI command into emergency mode. A meth container was preparing to leave Minneapolis in under 2 hours, escorted by 13 other trucks. It was the snakehead of the entire network, the final convoy that could make the remaining unrecovered cargo disappear. The order was issued immediately. All units, deploy intercept on I-94. In just 11 minutes, more than 200 federal agents poured out of the yard into vehicles, forming a dense black convoy racing toward the highway. Minneapolis slowly brightened behind them, but ahead the road was nearly empty due to the early hour. The cartel's 14 trucks moved in formation, each about 60 meters apart, steady speed of 68 mph, a formation showing they knew they were racing time. The lead FBI team accelerated, splitting into 3 prongs, one to block the convoy's front at the I-94-XI-394 interchange, one to close from behind, and a special team deployed through small access points to lock all exit ramps. As agents approached, one cartel truck suddenly changed lanes, deliberately forcing a federal SUV toward the shoulder. The collision sounded like metal tearing air. Immediately, 2 DEA vehicles countered by deploying running spike strips to shred the trailer's front tires. The trailer lurched violently, lost control, and flipped sideways, kicking up a blinding dust cloud. But that was only the first. Ahead, 3 more trucks suddenly accelerated, trying to ram through a temporary FBI barricade on an overpass. Unable to brake in time, one smashed straight into the mobile barrier, the body rearing up like a trapped beast, hundreds of crates flying from the refrigerated compartment. Agents swarmed as the metal was still screeching. They found in the spaces between legitimate cargo the meth crates disguised identically to the frozen seafood boxes. Authorities checked daily. On the west side of the highway, 2 trucks broke formation. veering onto a ramp leading to a narrow interchange, clearly an attempt to destroy cargo before capture. But the FBI was waiting. One lead truck tried to charge full speed down the incline, hoping to smash the container at the junction, but was blocked by 3 federal vehicles formed in an arc. The crash shredded the tractor, but the trailing cargo remained intact, a costly but necessary victory. As smoke rose from the burning engine, DEA agents used emergency cutting tools to breach the cargo. Inside was refined meth stacked in rows, with codes matching the server room system ID they had just decrypted. At the rear of the convoy, a brief shootout occurred as cartel security jumped from cabs, trying to flee into the median for cover. They were subdued within minutes. When identities were verified, agents were shocked. 3 of them were not Mexican cartel members or mercenaries, but actual DOT employees responsible for weight and safety inspections in Minnesota. They were on the Dirty Dozen list, stored in North Star Freight's underground server. They didn't just look the other way. They directly escorted shipments through checkpoints, ensuring every meth container cleared in just 9 minutes. While I-94 turned into a battlefield, on the east side of Minneapolis, another tactical team approached Judge Hassan Duwile's private residence on Portland Ave. When they breached the door, he was standing at his computer, hands still on the button to remotely wipe the server. It was too late. He was handcuffed immediately and let out amid the piercing alarms of the self-destruct data system he himself had configured. As he stepped into the agent vehicle, nearby residents looked out, unable to believe the judge they respected was behind the state's largest drug machine. By midday, when the final seized convoy was brought to the impound lot, the numbers were so stark everyone could only stare. A total of 52 tons of meth recovered, equating to hundreds of millions of lethal doses, 74 million USD in cash. If not seized, enough to bribe an official network spanning 7 states. And most importantly, the legal center of the entire system. Duwile had been cuffed, head bowed in silence. One FBI agent looked at the scattered containers on I-94, then at the overdose tally notebook he always carried. He said exactly what the whole team was thinking. The most dangerous ones aren't sitting in truck cabs. They're sitting in courtrooms, signing papers to let them run. As the entire scene was cordoned off, the DEA and FBI began releasing information to the press. If you want to follow the full court records, indictments, and remaining trafficking routes still under pursuit, subscribe to stay updated on every development. Thank you for following. See you in the next report.